You watercolor fanatics are going to absolutely love today. Stuart White is in the house. Stuart, what are you going to do today?
Well, I'm going to get down to some real basics about where does our paint come from. I'm going to mix up a little batch of watercolor so that if you want to get really rich darks and you want to get really vibrant color, we're going to show you how it happens. This is pure pigment and gum arabic and a little bit of glycerin. And then I'm going to show you how to do a big first wash on a large sheet of paper, which is usually the most intimidating thing to watercolor painters.
You're really going to teach us how to make watercolors, make our own watercolors.
Yes, it's so simple you would not believe it.
All right, I'm very excited about it. All right, we'll have you back in just a second here, Stuart. Our guest today is Stuart White, and this is going to be fun, how to make watercolors. And he's absolutely incredible as an artist, and you're going to get a chance to know him and see him work. But let's get this thing started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose. Now, here's your host, Eric Rose.
We have prizes for you today. And if you put a comment in the comments section, tell us where you're from. That's always nice. We are giving away a prize today. Will be the amazing Value Specs, great Christmas gift. Value Specs help you see your values, train your eyes. And quite frankly, I've trained my eyes a long time ago. I still use them because they're so helpful. We have a free video for you, 97 incredible art secrets. It's 50 of our top artists, 5 hours of video instruction. This is a sampler to give you an indication of what we do and how well we do it, hopefully. Anyway, go to 97artsecrets.com and you can get it for free. Now, you can get it on DVD if you want to pay the shipping, or you can get it on digital and you don't have to pay a dime. So just go ahead and do that, 97artsecrets.com. And of course, if you would like to subscribe to this program so that you're getting it every day, we try to be here noon on most days, not all days anymore. We were here 7 months in a row for 7 days a week during COVID. And then we cut down to 5 days a week for the rest of that year. And now we're back as consistently as we can be with everything going on. But if you would subscribe on YouTube at Streamline.Art Video and hit the little bell, that gives you notifications when it goes live. And of course, if you'll subscribe, follow on Instagram and Facebook, that would be really cool. Yesterday's winner is Carolyn Falletta from Staten Island, New York. She wins the easel brush clip, another great Christmas gift. Now, Stuart White is our guest today, and he's got some great videos out painting architecture and watercolor. And Stuart is an architect, so there's nobody better actually to teach you. He does architecture rendering anyway, and that's something you're going to learn more about today. Now let's get back to our guest, Stuart White. Are you there?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. All right. So I'm very excited about learning how to create my own watercolor.
Well, great. I love around it for a long time, mostly because it's a very effective way of getting a lot of color down in a simple way. Yes, it's very simple. And you can get gradations just by using water. You can move things up. You don't have to add white to get tones. And in architectural rendering, I'll just show you an example of this. Is a little bit of a little street scene of a proposed neighborhood. So in order to get that little believability factor, I go out and paint a lot of people sitting outside or under umbrellas, or I really had to pay attention to how to communicate the depth of windows and things like that, just with a couple of marks, because it was always a deadline. So anyway, I thought I'd start off today about the paint that, when you go to the art supply store, and we love them, I find myself, really having to think how much, I have to really control myself to just quit grabbing tubes off the shelf. And I found that for a lot of colors, I can really make my own and save an awful lot of money. Plus, it's a real pleasure to make paint. So I'm going to make up a little bit of an orange color, and I'll show you how simple it is. What you need is some dry pigment. It's a couple of brands. We don't need to go into them, but just look for dry pigment. It's all comes from the same source, good old Mother Earth. And here's some cadmium yellow and some red. And I've got a little lollipop stick, popsicle stick here. And you get yourself some watercolor medium. It's made commercially. It comes in a bottle. This is from Kramer. You can get it from Winsor Newton. I believe a lot of people make watercolor medium. It's just
what exactly is watercolor medium?
It's a combination of 3 elements: glycerin, gum arabic, and honey. And manufacturers play with those 3 variables to give their paint its particular qualities. If you like it soupy, you're going to get maybe more honey in it. If you like it a little solid, maybe it's got more gum arabic in it. It also has to do with the transparency of the pigment. And that's one thing I like to have a little say about, how much transparency you have. So if you'll just excuse me, I'm going to put this camera down on my lab table here.
I'll tell you what, while you're doing that, I'm going to pull you off. You get set up and then I'll be right back. Our guest today is Stewart White, great watercolorist. He's going to be part of Watercolor Live. You're going to love that. That's coming up in January, the world's largest watercolor conference. It's pretty incredible. Anyway, Stewart has a couple of videos out that I mentioned. He's got painting in architecture and watercolors, really incredible. And I want you to be aware of Watercolor Live because Stewart is going to be teaching there 27th through 29th, watercolorlive.com. There's some of the great watercolor masters of all time who are teaching there. You can learn more about that by going to the website and learn from it. All right, now back to Stewart. Okay, did you get set up?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do this.
All right. There we go. I know it's a funny angle, but that's what we got to work with here. Yeah, I overheard what you were saying. I think the lineup that you've got for Watercolor Live is really impressive. There's some fantastic painters in that group. So very honored to be a part of that. And yeah, I got to say, I got so much out of Realism Live, of watching Kwang Ho and all these various painters when I had the chance to do it. And there's so much I want to learn about oil painting, and these guys know it. They keep it simple for me. And it's just something I keep in my mind while I'm painting. So anyway, I've put a little bit of cadmium yellow deep into my this little plastic cup. And then I'm putting just a little bit, doesn't take much, of cadmium red medium in there. Now, these are strong colors, so I'm not really sure how dominant we're going to be, but let's just see what we get.
Okay, so those tuning in, he's using dry pigments that you can buy in a lot of art stores or buy online, and you can get every color imaginable. And now he's adding a watercolor medium, which has a mixture of other products in it.
Yeah, it's a formulation of gum arabic, honey, and glycerin. So some are more honey based than others. But anyway, I'm just going to put in a little drop or two. There you go. That's all you need. And I'll just take this is really finely ground pigment, so I don't really have to use a molar or a grinder or any of that stuff. So I'm going to just take this, and I'm just going to move it up, and look at that gorgeous color. Anyway, it's starting to get like toothpaste consistency. And I wish there was more to it than that because it's less impressive, but that's it. That's watercolor. That's what comes out of those tubes.
Now, will you let that dry so you can put it in pads, or do you like it?
You could. I like to just mix up enough to do a big wash on a piece of paper, and it's a little bit at a time, because I do have plenty of tube paints that I'll take with me. I have them in the studio. I take them with me when I do plein air things. But if you've really got a lot to cover and you want some really rich darks, I recommend making your own color, because beginning watercolor, the weakness of most of those paintings is that it's over diluted. That's because you're trying to be thrifty with your paint. And if you've got powdered paint, I think you can just be real generous with it and just let it go. So there we go. I've got a little thing. I've got a little piece of 1/8 sheet here that I'm going to just show you how to do a flat wash. And just take a mop brush, and just so we don't get any streaks, I'm going to just lightly go over this with water.
Pure
Let
water.
that soak in.
And do you use tap water or you use distilled water?
Yeah, I just use tap water. If you were going to mix a bunch of paint, I would put a few drops of distilled water in it. And if you wanted to store it, because then you know you don't have any impurities or things like that in it. Okay, so let's take our mixture and load that brush up. I think I've got it mixed up pretty well. And then, oh, that is strong stuff, man.
Well, that's what you want, right?
That's what you want. That's right. I mean, it will dry a little lighter, but
do you find that when you mix
that's
your
a flat
own
wash right there? And that's
you find
that's
when you
gonna look
mix your
great.
own, you get much stronger than you would get out of the tube, or is it you just would have to use so much out of the tube that this is more economical?
Yeah, if you took a cadmium orange, which is basically what we have here, if you took I can see there's a lot of glare on the thing, but I can tell you this is one really, really thick, flat wash here. But if you took that right out of the tube, you just squeezed out about $17 worth of paint. And you're not going to just get the density of this. And this is just two little thimblefuls of the powdered pigment. I did one earlier with red, and I'm going to go ahead and take that mix, and you can put it over it after it's really bone dry, and then you get this really, really vivid red orange. And it's yeah, I mean it's super exciting. If we want to take this wash that I just did, and you wanted to make it a graded wash, then we'll just start with some water at the top. But this pigment is so strong, it's hardly making a dent. There we go. Yeah, I got to really flush that with water to get it down to, because that paint just buried itself into the paper. And you just use your mop like you would a big floor mop. You just come in, slap it around. Don't stop when you're doing this, because if you stop, you're going to start creating streaks. And don't fuss with it. Don't keep going back and forth on it. Just come down one smooth, easy motion.
Okay, there's a question from India. It says, what is the name of the vibrant color you are using? Just for the benefit of the people who might have missed that, will you do another remix of the colors?
This color is something I just mixed up. It's powdered yellow and powdered red. They're both cadmiums, and that is it would be a cadmium orange, basically.
Will you show that one more time, mixing some color again? Just because there are people who missed it.
Interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will probably do this at Watercolor Live, is to show some different things you can do with the color mixing as you make your own custom color. If you find yourself using a certain blue, it's not in a tube, but you like a mixture of, say, lavender and cobalt, you just pre-mix a batch of it, and there you go. All right. So
how easy is it to predict? So if you take the powdered colors and you mix them together, what you see in the mixture of the two powders, is that pretty much what you're going to get, or do you have to kind of experiment? Like
yeah, good question, because that's something I think a little experience would say, is it, reds are going to be more dominant than the yellow. In a way, you have to say, well, maybe for every one, two parts of yellow, it's one part of red, depending on what you get. You're gonna need to do color charts, the way Richard Schmidt tells you to do. It's just make those little grids and see and write it down. This is what I used. This is what I did. This is what I got. And before long, your brain will have that in its memory, and you'll intuitively know how much to mix. So for those of you that are just coming in, I'm just gonna add a red in here, and there it is, just a little bit. I mean, this is going to last me a long time. So I'm going to put a little bit in there, and I don't want to forget to put the glycerin in there, because if I don't, what I'll have is basically a tempera of pigment and water that won't be fixed into the paper, and it'll be easy for water to pick it up. It'll be powdery. The glycerin is what gives it its watercolor qualities. If I were to add linseed oil to that, of course, I'd be having oil paint. If I put egg yolk in here with distilled water, I'd have an egg tempera. It's the same pigment. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's coming across. This is a vivid red. And playing with dried pigment is just it's a sensual experience, because it's amazing that we get these colors extracted out of the earth. So what I tell beginners is like, well, take a little bit of effort to put this paint in a clear form in a tube in these strong colors, and painters tend to like muddy them up by adding more and more stuff to it. Holy cow, that is really circus red right there.
That's really intense.
It is intense, and I've already got it on a layer of that, and it'll dry probably a shade lighter, but it won't be pink. It'll be hot red.
Oh, that's a good lesson.
And okay, I was going to show you a little thing that's a trick that John Pike, who is a very well-known painter, he makes he's got several books out. I don't know if he's passed away or not, but anyway,
no, he's still around.
I like John Pike and his approach.
It's not that
and
old.
He had an interesting idea about washes. Now I have a scene here. Like, this isn't the scene, but I wanted to show you that keeping a sketchbook is just such a fundamental part of understanding and planning and knowing what you want to get out of your painting. And I've got a large sheet here. I don't want to ruin it because I've got spent money on it, and I put a little time into doing a drawing here. Can I adjust the camera a little bit here?
Go for it.
All right, you get kind of an idea there. Now I'm gonna take a fresh thing of water. Because that pigment's so strong, it completely polluted my water reservoir. So we got some fresh water here.
So you have a sketch here that's got some tape on it. Can you explain what that's all about?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This is like different masking that I'm using. I use Crayola crayons, and I don't think there are any other wax crayons on the, on the market, but it's your old reliable Crayolas that your kids have. And I've just sort of scribbled little lavenders and periwinkle and all their crazy names, and kind of these burnt oranges and different things on this. I want them to be kind of fresh, and the wax crayon gives it an interesting texture. I've got this sort of a earthy foreground down in here, and you may not see the crayon, but once I put a wash over it, they'll pop out. And I've got masking tape here as a way of getting around covering all this stuff with liquid Frisket. And Frisket is a latex product, and it's something I kind of stay away from because I tend to ruin brushes with it. You have to, if you have to put like a little thin soapy water on your brush ahead of time, you'll probably be okay. But this is, for me, as I try to use the big areas, I'll use a masking tape that will pull off the paper without ripping it. So I think there's a Pro 3M product. It's called PRO, and it is it's really good on watercolor paper. It won't rip the edges, and it holds a good line. And then I have taken Frisket in certain areas and done little things that I want to withhold. And then if I want to do more lights that I've already painted over, then I'll have to resort to body color, which would be like a white gouache. Okay, so I'm going to take.
Can I ask you another question first?
What's that?
What is this frame that you're using? It looks like a metal frame.
It is. I love these things because I learned how to stretch paper with brown craft gum tape, and I got to where I was pretty good at it. But when it's all dry, you sort of have to pull it all off or razor blade your painting off the board. The gum tape has to stick to certain surfaces that you use to stretch your paint. And what I've done is I took this piece of watercolor paper. I think it's 200-pound cold press paper. I put it in the bathtub, let it soak. Excuse me. Let it soak for about 5 minutes or so. It gets that's enough for it. And then I put it on the side of the shower wall and sort of wipe off the excess. And I lay it down on this thing. And basically, it's 3 or 4 screws on each side. It clamps down the edges, and then let it dry overnight. And this will buckle maybe a little bit if I really soak it, but it'll always dry flat. And when you're done with it, you pop it out, and you've got this perfectly flat painting.
Nice.
You can mask within this thing and the sizes that you actually want.
Is that a product that someone sells?
Yeah, it is. You can make your own, but I'm trying to find the label. I think it's made in China. But
okay, that narrows it down to everything.
I'm sorry, I don't have the.
Okay, well, if you think about it, put it in the comments.
I will definitely type that in. I'll find that. Anyway, I like to just take a big brush called a mottler, and I'm just wetting up the area a little bit because I want the paint to not be streaky when I put this in. You see, I'm just coming around the side of that. I'm not necessarily going to hit the inside of where this masking tape is. But I can go ahead and when I start putting the pigment down, I want that to be light, want that to be light. I don't have to be so careful, and that's where you get these sort of self-conscious marks or streaks, or when you come around something, it shows up. You don't get the illusion of space going behind an object. So I'm going to just the John Pike trick is to just slightly on these washes, just slightly add a little bit of blue, magenta, and yellow. Pretty much the 3 colors that make up your color TV set: the cyan, primary yellow, and magenta. And he said it just makes it a better kind of a white underpainting than you would get with just clear water, and it gives it a sort of prismatic effect. And I never thought to do anything like that, but you just that's a little bit of a cerulean blue, and I'm going to use little bits of yellow in there. And it may seem really strong at first, but it'll really almost disappear to This may not be I know it's not my final sky wash, but I just wanted to kind of cover it all up with these sort of prismatic colors, and they're very subtle. I'm sure you can't see everything else, but it makes it for a more interesting white piece of paper. Just move it around. You know, some of the pigment's already like going into the paper, so it's got a little variation, and it adds a lot of visual interest to this thing. So I'm going to actually let that first bit dry. I'm going to add some pink to that, or some of this paint that I just mixed up in that dirty water.
Love that dirty water.
You can see how strong that paint is. I put the most, right out of the water thing, and I still get a definite orange glow to this. And that's what I want. I want the painting to glow, and that's what I think a good watercolor painting is. But let me show you how that masking part works. And I'm going to take a color, and when you go to Watercolor Live, I'll go into a whole lot of things about color mixing and color theory and what I want to do with that, and I'll even tell you what colors I'm using. Although I mostly focus on 4 elements: lighter, darker, warmer, cooler. So if I bring that in there, all the frisket and the crayons and little things like that are starting to show up. And yeah, it's just gonna. And then I kind of look at that and say, well, what can I make of some of that? Because I know that a lot of this is sort of undergrowth, and while that paint is working its way into the surface of the paper is kind of vulnerable to any kind of marks you want to make on it. I like to use like a chisel end. It doesn't really. If you can use your fingernail, and what that does is it actually bruises the paper. And
kind of like a fingernail on a blackboard. Just saying. Hello, Barcelona.
Yeah,
all right.
Let's see. This is an old, this scene, I'm sure you can't make it out. It's a beautiful old agricultural or cement hopper. I'm not sure what it is, but it's here in Easton, and it's got a lot of weathering to it. Nobody uses it anymore, but it's a great place to go and draw. I mean, speaking of that, I use a large piece of paper to work on plein air, but I would definitely draw on this in plein air, because you copy a photograph, there's something about drawing from nature that looks so different from drawing from a photograph. And it's maybe you're less precise, or maybe the way your eye perceives depth, it draws better from nature than it does from your photograph. Anyway, I've got a few things going on here that I can see are starting to be pretty interesting, and it's again, one of the things about watercolor that freak people out is you can't control it. Well, that's the beauty of watercolor is it you're really making mud pies here and having a blast and seeing possibilities and opportunities in this. This is sort of a lavender gray. I'm going to add a little ochre to this. And while you're putting it all wet, that's a good way to avoid mud, because it starts to create its own visual mixes, or actually physical mixes, right on the paper. And if you're just adding paint to something over and over and over, it just starts turning into mud. Right now, you put these in there, and it looks really fresh. It's got a lot of energy, and that's what I like in a watercolor. I like all those really meticulous ones as well, but my favorites are these sort of gestural, Sargent-like watercolors, that they're not overdone with detail. But again, each to his own. Anyway, this has got this I wish you could see this, but it's got these beautiful glowing effects with this pale orange and had I guess a little bit of teal in there, and it's almost enough to leave it. But I do have plans for a darker sky to make some of these lights pop out. Well, how are we doing? Is there any questions out there so far?
I don't see any questions, Stuart. We're doing fine. So basically, you wanted to show us kind of how you lay in that initial background. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the planning of this on this piece, I know that I want to have this wash behind my big silo item here. I've got some Frisket out there. This is still too wet for me to put a wash on it, but I can put a subtle lavender haze on the distance, and I think that'll be really nice in popping out.
Cool.
Popping out that these forms that are in the foreground. So I'm gonna mix up a little lavender, which I use quite a bit of. I think Daniel Smith makes a really nice lavender. It's very creamy and really holds up nicely to mixing in with other colors. It's a nice neutral to add to things. So I love for people to have that in their palette. So it's good to
Tell
have
me again the name of that. It's Daniel
a little
Smith and it's
spritzer
what?
bottle nearby for re-wetting paper, re-wetting an area, or diluting an area. Okay, so I'm going to. I know I've got a shadow in here. I've got a bit of a old tank right here, and I'm going to just go over that, hit a few things, go right up to the edge of my my masking tape. And I think what I'll do is let me wet that a little bit, see what happens. It starts running. I've got my board at a certain angle. It's probably 15 to 20. I'm going to up this up a little bit just to get some action in the back. Yeah, there's some interesting things happening there. And while something is wet, that's when you can really do the most effects and play with it. I think that if you want to do something like I want to change the whole color of this sky, which I don't really want to do, I like what I have here. Then I'd probably start at the top, really pitch it up kind of at a 30-degree angle and really come down and try to flush out everything and go over with a new color. Now these are old and beat up and weathered structures here. So if you get like little bits of paint on them, it just kind of fits in and works to your advantage. So I get a nice razor edge on this. It's an old container back in here. So that's going to work. And once I've got that, I don't need to have this masking on here forever. In fact, you really don't want to leave masking tape on your paper for very long because the gum will start to transfer itself over to the paper and it'll be there forever.
Do you think Sargent used masking?
No, I think I know he used, like a white candle, and that's about it as far as I know. I think he had a good sense of what to leave out. I think his biggest paintings involve the white of the paper would be his quarry studies.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, wow. I mean, they just, all he really wanted to do is like, let's just explore the cool and warm of ambient light and reflected light on these big stone forms. And that you probably would be tempted to, because they're square, to mask a lot of that stuff out. But I think the way he paints, he didn't really need to do that. And they have a sort of nice, natural, hand-hewn look to them. They don't look industrial like that. So,
Stuart, you're getting a lot of compliments in the comments. Not a lot of questions, but a lot of compliments. That means you're
good. Then I
covering
must be
things
making
well.
myself clear.
No, you're always clear.
Okay, so I'm like, this is still wet, and I can still play with it. This ochre has gone into this lavender, and it's bled itself out. It's still working. It's like it's like a dish that you're cooking, and it's granulating in a really beautiful way. And those are some of the things about watercolor that you just can't get with any other medium. Is this wonderful granulation, that it's this beautiful relationship between the powdered pigment and the tooth of the paper. I know I've got a piece of tape here. I'm going to leave that there until I work in that area. Right now, this tank is it's back there. I can have a lot of fun with that.
Camera.
I know I had a lot of streaky algae and things like that I was going to do in here. I've got some little bits of brush hair in this wash, and I'm certainly not going to leave it there, but I'm not going to mess with that while it's wet, because this paper is so delicate in its wet stage that any little thing you do is going to show up. And
what is the paper?
It's a Saunders Waterford 100, I think a 200-pound cold press.
I'm hearing a lot about Saunders lately.
Well, it's a paper that I'm just familiar with, and I like the way it looks. I wouldn't recommend any particular paper. I would just say that if you choose a paper that you like, is stick with it, because it's one element of variables that you can just say, I know how fast that absorbs paper. I mean absorbs paint, and I can anticipate certain effects. If I've got a different paper in there, it's got different characteristics. They all have different sizing. It's a gelatin that they use to make the paper not feel like paper towel. And I know some people even play with making their own sizing and sizing their own paper. I don't think that's necessary, but I do like the way this paper behaves in making textural effects, building material effects, and like I say, I'm just familiar with it. And if it's Arches or Fabriano or any paper that you have, as long as you're familiar with it, you've eliminated one of the many variables you have to think about in watercolor, which is the lightness and darkness of your pigments, the coolness and warmth of it, the wetness of the paper. There may be 6 or 7 major stages of wetness to a piece of paper, from bone dry to sopping wet. And you have to be a little bit attuned to where it's all at a certain stage in your painting. And I don't tend to work all over. I want to take an area, develop it, go on to the next, go on to the next. It's that way my wet bead of paint will always be connecting to the next area that I work in. It's a tendency sometimes, if I have a pale blue on my brush, I'm going to do all the places where the pale blue is. And I don't think in watercolor that's a really good approach, because you've got now you got 7 or 8 different watercolor drying times going on, and your brain can't, or mine can't anyway, keep all those details in mind.
We have a question from Bill, who says, why does he soak the paper in the tub and then let it dry? Can you explain that?
Why do I soak the paper in the beginning, then let it dry?
Yeah.
Again, well, I would just you can start to work on it when it's just slightly soft. I tend to just get the paper out there stretched, and then I start to draw on top of it after it's already stretched and bone dry. What the first soaking does is expand the paper so you can clench it down and get it to this point where it'll dry completely flat. And that's the main purpose of pre-soaking. A paper this large is going to expand maybe 4 or 5%. Now, if when it tightens up, it's as tight as a drum. And the other reason is, like, soaking it kind of gets the initial manufactured sizing off the surface of it, and it starts to behave in a way that the pigment's so responsive, and the paper's so responsive to what's going on with it, that it just has a predictable results.
Oh, cool.
There's an excellent question. It's a really good question. I have a lot of questions about stretching. If
Well,
this
one
was
of the
any
nice
smaller,
things-
I would just tape it down. But full sheet, I really need to have some stretching tricks.
Well, a lot of people have figured these things out after a lifetime of painting, and so these are the kinds of things you're going to learn on Watercolor Live for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go into it, some of it on my video on the drawing aspect, the pre-planning aspect, and I did a little bit with Realism Live about how important planning is. But in Watercolor Live, we'll definitely get into that, and a few surprises of different things we can do with the paint.
Cool. Well, we like surprises. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for doing this today. I think it's been fun to see how watercolor is made. I bet most of us have never seen that before. And how, if you're looking to save a little money, especially if you're doing a big bulk in something, that's a great solution. And I didn't know about this watercolor medium. I've heard that you could mix your own by creating, glycerin and honey and something else, but I didn't know they already made that. That saves you right there a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, you can actually, I think Winsor Newton makes a blending medium. I would add this to the mixture that I did. If I'm doing a sky, it just makes the paint flow in such a way that you've almost eliminated streaky skies, which I when I'm judging a show and I see a lot of these guys, you may not see it when you first put down your wash, but once it dries, you start to see where all these brush strokes were, and it's a little bit distracting because you wanted a smooth, a nice bleed from light to dark or whatever,
right.
But you don't want those streaks.
Yeah. And so you put that into when you're mixing the color, or do you add it to tube paint as well?
I put it in the I put a few drops in with my watercolor medium, and like I said, you could just use gum arabic, and that'll work.
You know what gum arabic is also good for?
Yeah, that's what adding it to pigment makes it watercolor.
The brush companies dip when they're preparing brushes. The final thing they do is they dip it in gum arabic and then shape it and then let it dry. And you can buy gum arabic so that when you want to shape your brushes at the end of a painting session, it does the same thing. That's
exactly right, Eric. You'll do that, I guess. And there's also, believe it or not, they have I don't know what it's called. It's Granulation Medium, which I seldom use. But I buy everything, and experiment with it so that you don't have to. Right. But it'll break down some of the pigments that don't have as much granulation. I think a lot of the reds and maybe ochres and certain browns don't granulate, and this will break it down to where you do get some of that. And it's a nice look. It looks kind of stony, and yeah, it's just a beautiful look. Now, some cerulean blues, cobalts, ultramarines, they granulate on their own. You don't need to add any of that stuff to it. They do that.
And that has to do with the pigment itself and the grind of the pigment, I'm sure. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for being on today. I have asked Christina to put your website and your information in the comments section so everybody can find you and find out about workshops and everything. And then if you want to do a little teaser about what you're going to do on Watercolor Live? Or do you want to be secretive about it?
Well, if you, of course, if you buy the video, there's a lot of the basic stuff in there about, we all go through the palette and this and that. And there's some useful information there. But I really think the main thing that people are interested in is not to be intimidated. It's what are some confidence builders about jumping into this material and feeling like you know what you're doing. And I'm a big fan of pretense. I think that if you pretend something for a little while, that's what you become. I mean, you can pretend to be you're a good public speaker and not be at all. But if you just pretend it hard enough, before you know it, you could stand in front of a crowd and say things that are heartfelt and you mean them. But that doesn't come right away. It definitely, to me, it starts with play acting.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Stuart. And we'll put the link to your video in the comments section as well. Everybody should have that, especially, I found it especially helpful. I know this is going to sound absolutely nuts. I'm not primarily a watercolorist. I do watercolor, especially since Watercolor Live last year, but I'm more of an oil painter, and I always struggle with architecture, but the lessons on architecture and painting architecture in there apply to any medium, oil or acrylic or watercolor or anything. So I think that's something that, because you have to understand the architecture, the perspective, the drawing, and how to make things appear literal without being literal. I think it's very helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Stuart.
All right. Thank you. This was a real pleasure.
All right. Okay. Well, all right. I was getting a phone call there. So thanks. We'll talk to you soon. Our guest today was Stuart White, and you can learn more about him in the comments because we've put his links to his videos. He'll be on Watercolor Live. Just want to tell you guys real quickly, Watercolor Live is coming up in January. It's going to be a massive audience. We're expecting 3,000 to 5,000 watercolor artists attending all around the world. And we have people teaching from all around the world, teaching a lot of different styles, a lot of different subject matters, a lot of different techniques. Everybody has their own approach, and some of them do it, with a bright, colorful approach. Others a little bit more muted. Some are doing more realistic. Some are more impressionistic. There's, everything from florals to architecture to landscape to still life. And of course, just a lot of different approaches. You're hearing from some of the world's best who are teaching you watercolor, and it's an opportunity to just be immersed for a few days and really get a chance to, reward yourself and impact the way that you do your work so that you become better. And people who have attended have found that they are getting a lot of value by just attending and then taking it to the next level. Stuart White, of course, is going to be there. The great Alvaro Castanet from Australia, which is a rare get. So this is pretty good. Anyway, we hope you'll consider attending. Remind you that you can subscribe to this when we're on daily at noon. It's on YouTube at Streamline.Art, or you can follow on Instagram or on Facebook. And by the way, follow on Instagram, please. I need all the help I can get. All right. Hey, all right. That's all I got today. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and Streamline.Art. We do everything for artists that we can think of to make you stronger, better, more confident. We believe anybody can learn to paint or anybody can learn to draw, but it's a process. There's no secret talent required. I know you might have a hard time believing that, but the reality is that most of the great artists alive today started out the same way all of us do, which is fear. You know, we don't know what we're doing. We don't understand it. We don't believe we can do it. But if you follow a process, you can get better. And that's what this is all about. I'd also like to say, you know, the goal of this program when we first started during COVID was to keep everybody kind of lift their spirits, keep everybody together. We're trying to do that still because this is a tough time for America, tough time for the world. And, you know, there's a lot of events that are unfolding that are changing our world around us. And we need to stick together as a community of artists and just be here for one another. And if you get a chance to tune in, be a part of this, be a part of Watercolor Live or any of these things, it's just going to make you feel a little bit more connected and make you part of the family. And we can all get through this together. You know, we're a special breed of folks. We need to keep our creativity. We need to keep doing our art, and the world needs us because we provide them escape. And so we're here to teach you and to inform you, to inspire you, to make you feel better about things. And so I hope we do that. And so have a terrific day. Whatever happens in the news cycle, don't let it bug you. Just don't let it bug you. I mean, it bothers you maybe, but don't let it get under your skin. You know, just stick to your knitting here, stay positive, stay upbeat. We're going to get through everything together. And so that's why we're here. Thank you for watching today. I'm Eric Rhodes, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.